So let me tell you how I removed the sway bar, front sway bar from a E39 540i. This also applies to the M5. This specific car here is a 1997 BMW 540i. It's an M62 B44 non-Vano 6-speed. I was doing timing guides, head gaskets, cleaning everything up, etc. So I said, why not put the Eibach sway bars in? So the front is known to be somewhat of a tough job. So let's see what I did. I don't think I did it in a really specific order, so I don't think it should matter too much. Of course, first of all, you're gonna have to loosen your front wheels, both of them. So once you jack it up, you can actually remove them. I mean the lug nuts. After that, so that jack that you see, I got from Harbor Freight. And at first, when everything was still together, of course, I jacked on the subframe point here. Again, using that piece of those two pieces of wood, just to get the jacking point higher. Then what I did is I of course put it on jack stands. Don't forget the wheel chocks on the ends of on the rear wheel so it doesn't roll back. You can also put it in gear, of course. Of course, don't always do that for sure. That's what I do all the time. I don't know if this is gonna help at all, but this is how a lot of other stuff you probably see removed. It doesn't have to come off. It's just part of the other jobs I'm doing. That's why like random stuff is on the ground. But this is how much the jack point. This is how much of the jack point has been used. There's still a lot of it left. Can't really see, but anyway, that's how high it is. I'm not sure if I can tell you exactly, but let's see. It's pretty high, but nothing crazy really. Basically, get it as high as you can. Jack it up with the wooden blocks or whatever else that's stable, and can jack it up a lot. So do that. Put it on jack stands. Lower it down with the jack onto the jack stands. Of course, make sure you look while you do that so they lower down nicely. All right, what's next? So again, I said I didn't do this in a very specific order, so I'll just tell you what I did. This is probably going to be somewhat hard to access. There's no cylinder head here, so it was super easy for me. But for you, I think you're going to have to use a bunch of extensions, since the cylinder head is probably all the way here. So it's going to be somewhat blocking it. Anyway, for the steering box, you want to disconnect it. You don't have to mess with the linkage here. You can just leave that. You're going to disconnect it. So one bolt here. And then one bolt here. I think it was a 15mm, so I used a ratchet, and I also used a wrench, of course, to counterhold. And another one is here, and of course you find where the nut is and you counterhold it. So you get that disconnected. As you can see, it dropped. It drops together with the subframe, and that's what lets the subframe drop. Of course, it's not the only thing, but that's one of the things. So you do that. You disconnect both of the wishbones that go here. That's easy to do. I undid this control arm. Now I think if I even needed to. I haven't put in the new one yet, but I took it out from the passenger side. I think I'm gonna just try to put it in from the passenger side. Now I'm thinking if I needed to do that. I think that did let me drop the subframe down more. On that side, I didn't have to remove it, and the Swaybar came out anyway. So now I'm kind of thinking to myself if I had to do this or not. So this, maybe I did have to, because I'll need to check once I put the new one in. I'll need to check if how this interferes with the subframe, with the Swaybar maneuvering out of it. Maybe I have to, but anyway, to remove this, it's not the easiest thing in the world if it's old. Let me see. This is the tool I used. Again, a Harbor Freight tool. Once this was off, of course, this was facing me. I put this on all the way in, of course, get it in as much as you can, and then I positioned this kind of into the center of the bolt, and I had to use a lot of force. I repositioned it like 3 times, and I thought I'm gonna break the tool, to be honest, and then later on it just popped with a really loud sound. So I thought I'm gonna break it, but eventually it popped off. So I'm talking about this, the ball joint. So I'll try to let you know if you actually need to remove it or not, because sometimes it's definitely tough to get it off. Also, I used the pickle fork at first, but then later on I realized the pickle fork was hitting the shield. I think it even went past the shield a little bit into the rotor, like right here on the other side. So, and it was also going into the whole spindle itself, into the metal of the spindle. So probably don't use a pickle fork unless you find a good direction that it's going to go in, if you do need to remove it. Alright, what's next? So of course the steering box, of course you undo all the Swaybar bolts. You take the bushings off so it's more maneuverable. You undo the links. This one was loose, actually. At the top I found it loose. That's why I just took the whole thing out. I'm gonna look at it again, but you don't need to undo the top, just the bottom. Then it moves out the way. As you can see, the other one still has the link on it. So after that, you're going to these pieces here go from the engine, and they mount to the motor mount or the engine mount. I forgot what size bolt it is. I think it was maybe a 16 or something. Anyway, figure it out. But you undo the bolts here and here. Of course, this is going to be all the way down on it. It's going to be like touching this part. This whole thing will be sticking out through here. So you'll undo the bolts, and then really you could use, so mine has no oil pan right now at the bottom, if you can tell. So what I did is I jacked onto the transmission bell housing. I'm not sure if it would be beneficial for you to use the oil pan. I think it would raise up easier and quicker and safer. It wouldn't put as much strain on the transmission mounts since it's further away from the transmission mounts. But then you lose, of course, all the space in the front for you to, you know, lay on. Assuming you're doing it the way I'm doing it, with jack stands, no lift, whatever. So, as far as that goes, once you undo the bolts, this is exactly where I jacked it. Can't really tell now, but there's somewhat of a flat spot on the transmission bell housing. So that's where I put the jack. That's where I put the wooden blocks in the jack. Try to get it as center as possible. Mine kind of creeped off as I jacked it, but it was stable, so I left it like that. And as you jack up the engine, you have to make sure the holes go through the bolts up nicely, or else it might catch and it could tear the motor mount. If you have someone with you, have them check. I did myself, it wasn't a big problem. I just kind of wiggled the engine, or you could use I don't know, a pickle fork, anything really, just to kind of maneuver it out of the way, just so it goes out nicely. A crowbar, whatever. Maybe it's gonna go out nicely. I barely had to adjust mine. So that's that. I removed the heat shield, one of these things, from the driver's side. It was like 3 8mm bolts, super easy, so that's not a big deal at all. What else did I do? This was like the last step I did, and then that made it successful. So I undid this. I think it's called, I forget if this is the pitman arm or if this is it. I forgot what this one's called. Can't tell you for sure, but anyway. Again, two 50mm bolts, a bolt and a nut, excuse me, just like the steering box. And you, let's see, where does it go normally? Oh, it goes this part. This part normally goes here, but when you disconnect this pushes out all the way out. You see this, the tie rods are like binding, but of course there's no load. There's not much load, so you can do this kind of stuff. But you push it out really all the way down. You get the steering. In my case, it was mostly all that way. This way you get a lot of room. So the Swaybar gets a lot of room here, and some room here as well. So you can't, anyway, as you're gonna be taking it out, I took it out through the passenger side, so you're gonna maneuver it, maybe even flip it. I forgot if I flipped it one time, or maybe like a 180 or something, and then it came out through here. Again, I did not have to remove this. So I don't know, I'm thinking if I had to remove it from this side. At first I was gonna remove it from the driver's side, but then as I tried this, that worked, so I didn't have to mess with that. Let's see, as far as dropping the subframe, there are 3 bolts on each side. They're 18mm. One is here near the upper control arm. One is right there in this hole. The other one is here in the front near the motor mount. The other side is pretty much the same, again near the motor mount, near the tie rod, and again in the same spot just on the other side near the headers, near the exhaust. So what else? I did not have to mess with this at all. I left it. I think the ball joint has some play so that as the steering box moves, that moves as well. Or maybe it doesn't move at all since the steering box gets disconnected and drops down at the same time. Anyway, didn't have to touch that. Didn't touch any of these tie rods, center link, whatever. Of course, only that part, as I mentioned. I think, what else? I did drop, oh, let me finish on the subframe since I started on that already. I removed the ones on the rear fully, and then as I was loosening the front ones, since this is obviously going to give me the most advantage after that one, since I need the most space in the rear, I was loosening this, then I loosened this fully, and when I saw that the bolt came out, I screwed it in a little bit, maybe just barely a turn or whatever, and then I knew how much I can drop that one. Because obviously if you disconnect it fully, I don't think the subframe is going to drop. It's going to drop a lot, but it's not going to drop on you as far as I know, because the suspension is going to be, well, like the center link, whatever, is going to be holding it, because that would hit, etc. So it's not going to fully drop, but I didn't want to go with the trouble of lifting something like this back. It's not that heavy. I can like push it back again, but aligning everything, etc. I think there's alignment bolts or these alignment holes on here. Anyway, I didn't have to fully drop it, so that's a good thing. So yeah, I use this kind of as a guide to tell me how much I can drop the center bolts. And of course I did it the same way on the other side. Let's see what else is there. So I did the links. That's easy. You just disconnect this piece. You don't need to mess with. You can just leave it disconnected. You do the links. You of course undo the brackets. Take the bushings off. You raise the engine. Of course, when the engine is not pushing on the subframe anymore, you drop the subframe. You undo this link here. I forgot what it's called. Again, I'm not sure on the control arm here. As I put it back, I'm going to make a second video and connect it to this one. I'll see how much interference there is. I forget if I need to take this off. You undo the steering box, you take the heat shield off, that's a piece of cake. All this wiring, this is from when I did this wiring here that's kind of loose. I forgot to bolt that back on when I did my upper oil pan, so don't worry about that. But anyway, I'll have to bolt that back on. I think it's held by those bolts right there. What else do? Yeah, you disconnect, of course, the motor mounts before you can even jack up the engine. I did it through the bell housing, as I said. You get a lot of movement in these, in the rotors. Like I can move it out the way out, so that helps. You move this, the center link with the tie rods. You move it all the way out as much as you can go to that side, to the rear of the car, so then you get a lot of space for the sway bar to kind of wiggle in here. I'm thinking if there's anything else. Let's see. Did I do anything here besides the steering box? I don't think so. That's about it, really. So yeah, there's the sway bar. That's what it looks like. There's the Eibach box over there. Sway bar link, etc., etc. So yeah, of course we do remove the lower control arms. I didn't mention that again in my second list. I think that's it, really. I don't think it's as hard as I thought. It did take some messing with. If I would have to do it a second time, I think it would be more of a straightforward job than the first one. I think that's it. Maybe I'll add something else as I remember more stuff. Good luck. Yeah, another thing. So I jacked up the transmission bell housing. I mean the transmission and the engine basically to the max. It's pretty much touching the firewall. My jack didn't go, stopped going, so I did jack it up a lot. If you can tell, the clearance between the motor mount and the actual engine mount is pretty big, so that also gave me a lot of play between the upper oil pan and the subframe. Okay, the Eibach Swaybar is finally in. It took me a while to figure this out, I won't lie. I got it in through the passenger side, just like what I used last time. Here's the Swaybar. So I tried the driver's side, then I tried the passenger side again. Anyway, it took me forever. And then I finally realized that I should drop the subframe even more. So on this side, on the driver's side, if you can see, it's not dropped that much. So the rear bolt is off, the front bolt is off, and the only one on the driver's side that's still in is the middle one. So the threads on the middle ones are way longer, so you can drop it quite a lot, really a lot, while the bolt is still in, holding the subframe. It's in that hole. Where is it? Let me see. In that hole right here. And on the other side, it's dropped way more. So again, the rear bolt is off, the front bolt is off, and there is the middle bolt. As you can see, I dropped the passenger side quite a lot. I was using a jack under it to support it while I was dropping that, but I don't think I even needed that really. So you needed to do that for the Eibach because it's way thicker, it's bigger. It's not exactly the same. Like for example, these parts I think are more they have more of an edge. This as well, if I remember correctly. So they're not like exactly the same. Plus they're thicker. As you can see, there was some, as it was going in, some paint was rubbing on here. If you need to remember how to put it back, just grab the old one. That's kind of what I did, because at first I was a little bit confused. Grab the old one, put it back, and then you'll know exactly how to put in the old one, in the new one I mean. When it comes out of here, so you're going to be under the car. Here's what my setup looks like. The tie rods are all way out of what they normally would be. This is still connected. This is of course way to the side, disconnected. Everything is just off. But as it's gonna go out, it's gonna go out in that direction. Not straight out like this, but more like that. So that's kind of how you're gonna put it back. It's kind of gonna, so for me it's kind of gonna, it points more to the rear than to the side. So you're gonna kind of lift it with one hand and with the other one pointed in. It's gonna go over, and this piece, the end of it, it's gonna drop down in here. If it drops down here, which is not what you want, then that's not gonna work. Gotta try it again. Once it goes in here, sorry, my camera is way too close. It's not really grabbing the picture I want to show you, but it's gonna go here on this side, the very end of it, and then you kind of know that you're doing it right. It's gonna start rubbing, I think either here or behind the bolt. That's where the bushing goes in for the Swaybar. And yeah, you gotta drop the subframe way more for the aftermarket to go in. The OEM is a piece of cake to put back in, but this one does require some work. If you try it a lot and mess with it, you see there's no way it's going in, drop the subframe more. Don't waste your time. Of course, don't forget to drop these a little bit. The ends of the subframe, This one has a lot of clearance, like, again, the passenger side, because I dropped it way more. But don't forget, sometimes this might kind of go back on top. You might have to pull it down a little bit because of the weight, you know, shifts, and if it shifts forward, this is going to slap back on to the metal, so you might have to adjust that as well. Anyway, that's about it. Good luck.